Right, so we're doing prayer
Okay,
this episode.
back to prayer. Yep.
I mean, I just have a few questions that I'd be keen to discuss,
Hit me.
and we can see where it goes. So, I think one thing I always wondered as a kind of growing up, I think this doesn't plague me as much anymore, but I'm curious, like, how you conceptualize this. You know, if why is prayer obligatory? You know, if it's meant to be this kind of like authentic kind of relationship sort of thing between you and God and all the rest of it. I think the modern mind finds it hard to understand, like, why is this thing obligatory? It's contrary to our sort of modern sensibilities about authenticity. I think big modern sensibility, freedom, etc.
Yeah. However, so just going from the modern mind backwards, what isn't alien to the modern mind is the idea of discipline, is the idea of a habit, is the idea of consistency, compounding gains, all of these things, and just generally ritual, of course, and the place of ritual, and people have discussed and written about this in many ways, just across different cultures, and the value of that. So the idea that, and then more broadly speaking, that the idea that there is prescription, and actually just that reminds me of the medical analogy that's often given. I mean, you'll find this often in classical kind of sort of scholarly literature, and as even contemporary terms, the medical analogy is often given to illustrate various points. Especially, not to question the authorities, right? So when you go to the doctor, you're not going to, you're going with your problems. You're going to do what you're told essentially, and take this antibiotic, every day for X days and what have you. So the idea at that point in time, the point is you want a certain type of outcome, here's a prescription. The trick is in a way to transcend the obligation, I think. Meaning, what I mean by that is to transcend the idea or the feeling of obligation. So that things start in such a way, and it's a parent-child relationship thing is quite useful to look at here, just as an analogy, because obviously, all parents will have some degree of restrictions, obligations, rules, from an early stage, until the child gets the point of it, essentially. And then you don't have to frame it in that context. So you could argue that actually we go from the point of view that say, well, God knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows our nature. He wants the best for us, let's say. And therefore, in the interest of preserving our relationship with him, and in the context and knowing the fact, and we know this anyway, that the sources of distraction, and to use a term that I like from what you said, a couple of weeks ago, psychic junk accumulating left, right, and center, then the value and the benefit of this. And we all know, certainly as children to our parents, there's always stuff where now I see the wisdom. Right, that is very common, and there's so many things like that. Which at the time, honestly, I mean, I am a rebel by nature. We'll talk about that another time, maybe. But the number of things that I rebelled against, in terms of not wanting to do, not interested, with my parents and mum especially. But now I'm just so grateful and thankful for all of those things that I just went along with, even sometimes begrudgingly. But now you understand the value of. So I think that's kind of where we can understand, at least as a starting point. But as I said, the idea is once the relationship and the understanding deepens and develops, then hopefully it's not something that we're only doing because it's an obligation, because that's very much coupled with the idea of like a fear-based motivation, essentially, which has its place, isn't necessary at points in time, I think, but is certainly not the way to forever, have the relationship.
Yeah. What's your advice for someone who's trying to undo that like obligation vibe? So this is something that I've been trying to undo, I'd say for a few years, but I mean it's still there, and actually I've sort of reached a new level where I'll sometimes feel like I'll feel the instinctive sort of obligation calling. I'll feel that the instinctive thing of like, okay, it's now Maghrib time or something. Yes. It's now Asr time or whatever. And I'll instinctively feel like, okay, I need to do this obligation. and then I'll think, well, no, I shouldn't be thinking about it that way. And then I'll think, damn, like, you know, I'll kind of like feel bad that I'm thinking about it. You know.
And by the time you've exited this spiral, the whole time is finished. That's funny. Yeah. So so question is, how to
practical, like, you know, hacks, path, whatever, you know.
I mean, there's many ways to address this. I think, like, I'll always bring it back to as a starting point, that the way you frame your prayer is going to be a reflection of the way you framed your whole life anyway, right? So and it works the other way around too, in the sense that the effect of the prayer will then affect life. But why I'm saying that is because the prayer will feel natural or unnatural to the extent that the rest of your life feels like it's oriented around your relationship with God. If the rest of your life feels like it's oriented around your relationship with God, this will feel like a natural, synchronous part of your cycle of existence. But where the underlying intentionality for things outside of prayer are at odds with that relationship, or not motivated by it, let's say, then you'll find this. We had given that analogy of, like, you know, pit stops in the Formula One race, and the idea of a coherence between these two things, and then they cycle through, or a break on any kind of journey. You know, there's different or check-ins with your boss. And in between those check-ins, you're representing what the boss wants, essentially, or, you know, you're working in tandem with. It's all in sync. I find it, for me personally, just a useful, like, when I can sort of spend the time to zoom out a little bit and think about, well, what's the thrust of the rest of my life going? I find that when that's in order, the prayer fits beautifully and naturally, like, within that much better. So even though that, I do think there's a root cause thing there. You know, we can do the hack and the micro bits, and those, and it is true, obviously, because that where even when the rest of things are out of sync, you know, the prayer can help bring things back into sync, or to infuse, or make a better situation, you know, of the life that's sort of in between the prayers. So anyway, that macro point is clear?
Absolutely, fully.
Okay, fine. Now what it requires to do that, though, is a significant thing, and that's something which we need to maybe have a separate discussion on, which is, well, okay, fine, that's we can talk about how do you orient the prayer in such a way that's meaningful and substantial and aligned. Okay, now how do I do that for the rest of my life? You know, and that's obviously a bigger discussion. That's something which, I've sort of, you know, spoken about, shared, talked about, whatever, and we can go into it. But that's important. Okay, so then as far as the actual thing is concerned, like, I wouldn't beat yourself up about the fact that there's then this initial mindset thing of, like, frankly, like, you know, sometimes there's that, right? Sometimes it's not that. Sometimes actually, for many people, maybe it's just who are, you know, habitually praying, like, it's not. There's not positive anticipation, nor is there frustration.
Okay, yeah.
There is literally, like, there's this, like, neutrality almost, like
it's like brushing your teeth. Well, actually, I find it kind of annoying to have to brush my teeth a lot of the time. But
okay. Well, we can think of a better example. Like, I don't know, like a morning coffee even sometimes. I don't know, or maybe a good one is clothes. Yeah, like changing clothes. Like getting dressed.
Yeah, you got to get dressed.
Like that kind of mindset, which is almost purely robotic, unless you're choosing for a particular.
What proportion of your, like, prayers would you say feel like natural, coherent, etc.?
Well, getting a bit personal there. Having told us about your prayers in the middle of the night, and I don't know, proportionality. Like, I feel a relatively high proportion feel like, you know, sort of the experience. Like, let's put it this way. I think a good way to say it, did I find that a beneficial experience? I think that's a good way to kind of frame it.
Sure.
Because obviously, for us to discuss in the context of divine acceptability.
That's not what I'm asking. Yeah.
I do think, though, that's the other side of the coin of this, of course. Like, if the fact that you felt its benefits suggests that you were immersed or involved to the degree that would align with that. I think that's the way to think about it. So I do feel, at least nowadays, I would say, like, on most occasions, I feel like, I don't finish and then think, oh, what just happened, kind of thing. Right? Because that feeling is very common. I've had it many times.
Yeah,
I know you've had it many times. Yeah, right. Let's just lay out all the confessions, right? But, like, and people generally, like, you know, and that will acknowledge that that's something that's experienced many times. So, Yeah, but the thing then to kind of to think about or to focus on in terms of help anticipation. So when I teach the Transform My Prayer course, which is freely available on my website, the first thing after we go into the macro points to do with the prayer, the very first lesson is literally called initial mindset. Yeah. So what I tell people to zone in on is exactly that point in time, right? At the point that it occurs to you that now the time has come for this next one, like. First and foremost, just process, like do what you did. That's great, right? Because the fact that you're just paying attention to the way that you're feeling about it. If you then notice that, as you described, that actually, you know what, that like I'm not feeling too great about it or overly kind of buzzed up about it or whatever, yeah. Right? Okay, but there are things you can do to kind of up the ante, so to speak, or like to get excited, right? And part of that, I think, is to do with, again, just to realize, like, even though there is a repetitive and a routine and a nature to it, is just to remind yourself like what exactly you're about to do, right? It is not a small matter, for somebody then to say, I am literally I stand beyond like the vastness of the entirety of the divine presence, and I'm invoking that in some way or connecting back into that in some way. That is not a small deal. Like, and just reminding yourself of that momentarily even is enough to then this is the other side of it, right? Which is then almost to put everything else in its relevant place, just to almost suppress everything else, right? So that almost all you start to see, right, is the divine essentially, and is your interaction with the divine, and then that pertains to this idea of worshiping or serving God as though you see Him essentially, and meaning that I don't see anything else, or don't see anything else except that I see through that lens essentially. Another very basic, simple way to do it is to think about, like, I find this really useful. I often say to people, like, just look at your hand, right? Or something around you, on you, part of you, that is just something that you take for granted. And this is a really useful way, actually, to tackle that issue about, like, the feeling of routineness of prayer. It's like, we have no problem with the fact that we are routinely functioning as human beings. We have no problem with the fact that the earth continues to spin and do its rotations and what have you. And meaning, actually, you realize everything depends on cycles and repetitions, right? The general orbiting, the functioning, the water cycle, the respiratory system, digestion. Well, I mean, the whole shebang basically all depends on this. And that's fascinating because actually, of course, as we know, and to relate it to some of our previous discussions, God describes the heavens and the earth as being in a state of Islam, in a state of submission, i.e. like a devoted, orderly kind of thing. They're falling into the divine pattern, the divine plan. And so it's like when we go through these cycles and repetitions of the prayer, we're almost in sync with this orbiting, cyclical, repetitive kind of thing, which again brings us within that kind of overall sort of vibe. But the point being of just reminding yourself about something you have taken for granted can then bring us the type of feeling that says, I want to show gratitude, and actually when you think about it, I've done this is a powerful one to remind yourself about, especially when you have like the time. We process time very differently in Salah, right? I'm sure you probably acknowledge that. Yeah.
I was baffled when I realized that actually I can get through like 4 cycles of prayer in like 2.5 minutes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Which I would say is probably slightly on the fast end.
Okay, yeah.
No, but it probably felt like
longer.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It might have felt like 5, 6, 7, 10, whatever. Yeah, and I say this is a really practical and a useful thing for people to try. Okay, like before you start. So I'm not saying necessarily in congregation, but I'm saying before you start in your own prayer, whatever it is, an obligatory or voluntary or whatever it might be, doesn't matter. Just keep your phone sort of beside you, obviously airplane mode, all that. All right, and just start your stopwatch, and then just start to pray. Pray as you pray. You're not trying to achieve any particular time or anything, right? Just do your normal thing and then just look at it afterwards. And 90% plus of the time, the amount of time that has actually elapsed is a lot less than what you felt. Now, the other observation then to realize is that actually, if you were to look at all of the obligatory units, right? I think personally, I say to people, like, as a rule of thumb, probably the absolute minimum, that you want to be like, or a good rule of thumb is like for a minimum possible, probably acceptable pace, let's say, or a respectable pace. As a minute, it's probably like a minute a unit. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So 2.5 might want to look more like 4 or something, right?
Okay, fine.
As a kind of minimum. And even that for a lot of people will feel like slow. But it's, but now let's think for a second. So if there are 17 obligatory units a day, we're talking 17 minutes. Okay, almost double it then, half an hour. Proportionally, what are we talking about? Half an hour out of 24 hours. 1 out of 48, right? It's almost like close to a zakah percentage. Yeah, and that's actually an interesting one because basically, Dr. Abdul Hakim Murad came up with this. One of his contentions is that salah is the zakah of time.
Ah, nice. Yeah? That's a good one.
Yeah. So the idea of, and there's something profound about that because of course, the salah and zakah are essentially your the prayer and the giving of alms and of money is your the minimum obligatory sacrifice of the two core components, if you like, time and money, essentially, right? And so, and that is, I think, part and parcel of the wisdom of the centrality of those two as twin things, basically. But the point being, it's like, actually, wow, it's like most people are not spending more than half an hour a day out of 24, and still it's it feels so burdensome. And that's crazy. Like, as in, okay, it's not my style to make people feel bad about things, but sometimes it has its place. It's like, come on, man. It's like, actually, what's being asked of us is not significant that way. Yeah, okay, fine. You add on even if you to add on, the sort of the ablution, the washing, the practicalities of going from here to there, whatever. Add it, okay, I find even an hour, let's say, but still an hour out of 24. Or if, fine, you want to take off the sleep. Okay, fine, take off the sleep, right? An hour out of 15, 16, whatever it might be if you're sleeping a solid 8-9 hours, right? Which is apparently what they recommend nowadays, but no one gets, right? We're still talking single-digit percentage comfortably. And then the rest of your life, do what you want. It's like with the zakah thing, sometimes for people who've got it, like it feels like a bit of a pinch. You forget 97.5% is still sitting there, So, yeah, I think all of these things help with the perspective. And then actually you can feel, okay, actually, not so much a burden. I'm doing it anyway, right? That's the point. That's the shame in most cases.
Yeah.
The effort's made.
Yes, exactly.
Like you're doing it kind of begrudgingly. There's like a bit of fear, a bit of this, bit of that, and it's like, well, you might as well just go for it.
Yeah.
That extra minute or two is going to make all the difference.
Yeah. I'd say that the times when I've had sort of the most meaningful prayer is in I'd say like number one on the list is when you're in a time of just like absolute need, when you like you really need God to come through on something, yes. And you're just desperate for this thing. Then I think it's very easy to have like it's completely natural. Are
there any examples you would be willing to share with regards to that or not?
I don't know.
Okay, maybe exam related or.
Or you
always felt so comfortable with those.
No, exactly. Yeah, I think for my GCSE exams, man, like I was fully locked in. Like every morning, I was like doing extra prayers before going to school, etc. Yeah, I was. So,
but when by prayer you mean salah specifically?
Yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think when you're sort of like really desperate, I think it's like completely natural, and it's sort of I don't know. It almost feels like. It kind of lifts the burden from you when you do it, like you kind of feel at ease. And so I'd say that's number one. I'd say number two is when you're like really grateful, like when you're like really grateful for very overtly grateful for something that has just happened. It also feels like very natural.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously we all the time we are in need. Absolutely. And we have all these things to be grateful about.
There's an amazing verse for that. One of my favorites in. God, if I can get this right, I think 35th chapter. It's Surah Fatir. Fatir means the originator or the creator. Basically, it says, so God addresses all people. Ya Yohannas, O people, antumul fuqara'u ila Allah. Like you are basically poor, right, in front of God, right? Meaning in need. Like the same word, fuqara used to describe those who we give. Yeah, exactly, right? Give zakat to, etc. Right? The one who's poor, impoverished before God, and God is the one. He is Al-Ghani al-Hamid, right? He is the one who is kind of rich, independent, praiseworthy, essentially. Like, the constancy of the need that we have, and to be aware, and that is essentially the high, like a higher level of than just awareness. I think. Honestly, I think like the more I find myself saying and thinking this so much, and increasingly over time, is like almost the entire thing comes down to not taking anything for granted. And just recognizing source, which is why, by the way, to your point about gratitude as well, in the Quran, the word for denial or disbelief, kufr, is synonymously used I should say that it is used as a contrast to shukr, to gratitude. So you get iman and kufr, belief and disbelief, or if you like, almost like an affirmation and denial, but then you get kind of shukr and kufr, right? Gratitude and ingratitude. And the idea, of course, which is kind of well popularized now, I think, that the idea of denial, it's like you can't be an atheist, you can only be in denial, sort of thing, right? Like, meaning the reality is the reality regardless, right? And it's like, and so it's the ultimate ingratitude. So this is another useful way to think about, we're talking about these linguistic things and substance and whatever, like, it's like the lack of recognition of the source. It's like, if you give me some water, if you give me something, I recognize the source and I express gratitude, or I feel gratitude. But we are willing to recognize these sources, but we fail to recognize sufficiently or at all, the source, capital S. The ultimate ingratitude, the ultimate form of denial, right? And essentially taking things for granted. Because, what does it matter where it comes from? And this is the interesting thing, right? You have those gratitude. I don't know what you think about this, but it's like, one thing I found interesting is the idea that, I do find really interesting this sort of, if you want to say, manifestations of, let's call it, spirituality in a secular kind of frame. And it's like all the same innate stuff people need to do, like these kind of gratitude journals, which are strong. So, but gratitude always, in my mind, there always needed to be an object for gratitude.
Yeah,
it's like, offer gratitude out there somewhere. Okay, yeah. But yeah, like, I think that's what it really comes down to. Yeah.
Okay, so you think kind of the cure, your prescription is just kind of reflecting on things to be grateful for, and
wonder is,
and our state of need.
Wonder is, like, I think this is a massively underemphasized part of things, like wonder, amazement. Like, it's a massive topic in Revelation, obviously, right? Like, it's literally everywhere. That the idea of signs and indicators. And I just think it's one of these beautiful things. I find just really powerful, this kind of triangulation between three sets of indicators, right? Because as far as this divine communication is concerned, God is saying, if you want to know about me, right, you look to these things, you look to the signs, okay? And there are signs within yourself, which are, physical, yes, but, metaphysical, intuitive, etc. Your essential nature, your conscience, your consciousness, all of these things. Then there are the signs or the indicators out there in creation. Okay, I look at water, what do I see? Do I see just a glass of water, or do I see something more? Right? Because God says, do you literally, in translation, do you see the water that you drink? Did you send it down from the sky? Did we send it down? It's just smack down, basically, right? So there's the mic drop verses, which are basically like, and then he says, if we wanted, we would have made it bitter. So why aren't you grateful? Again, I drink it, you take it for granted. Just imagine, I haven't said this for a while, but this is a nice reflection. It's like, just imagine if every day the water that came out the tap correlated to your internal state. Right? Just imagine if, like, the way you would experience the water that you drink, it would adjust relative to how you're actually seen by God at that point in time.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I'm not sure I do. So
what's up with you, man? Come on, we're obviously talking for too long. What I'm saying is, imagine that let's just say the 0 to 100 in terms of total denial and apathy arrogance and rebellion, and 100 in terms of your like faithfulness, devotion, love, etc., as far as God is concerned. And I'm saying, depending on where we swing between these things at any point in time, right, within various ranges for different people. Just imagine if the water quality was set such that you would experience that relative to where you are on here. Where would we all be then? Right? That's but then now that it's here, then it doesn't reflect back. So I'm just saying, like, that's there's the kind of wonder that leads to gratitude. There's a kind of wonder that just leads to awe. So a really powerful notion. Awe is a powerful thing, like this idea of khashya, or it's a kind of a combination of like, it's like I think overwhelm almost is like the thing that comes with it, right? Like, I'm just so overwhelmed by the majesty of things. That is, this and okay, we talk about prayer is an obligation. That's an obligation. This is an obligation. Well, so is this, by the way. Because the language of the Quran is no different to command us to reflect on these things and to remember these things, right? We again, if you look purely on from a revelation standpoint, things like, for example, demonstrating awe or having awe is no differently expressed imperatively than fulfilling your prayer.
Oh, okay.
Or remembering God. Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So it's like, and sometimes with the Quranic weightings of things, it's really interesting just to see like what the weighting of things are in terms of things like this stuff to do with like the ayat, or the fact that they're like actually just using your faculties just to observe and to see, but to see through things. That's a hugely powerful kind of theme in the Quran. I mean, one verse that comes to mind, or a phrase, that إنها لا تعمل الأبصار ولكن تعمل القلوب التي في الصدور, that it's not people's eyes that are blind, but the hearts in the chest that are blind. So there is a big difference in the Quran between seeing and really seeing, and everything is to do with seeing beyond the veil of the material kind of realm, essentially. So I don't know, man. Like, I think honestly, we wouldn't consider it an act of worship, for example, to see it like, I don't know, to go and research bees or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we frame it as act of worship.
This is one
of these stuff. But is it part? Again, this is just all part and parcel of this natural way of being in a state of wonder and reflection, what have you. So whatever I'm seeing, it's like, wow, that is amazing. Like, in relation to your very first question about like, kind of what helps or supports this overall process, it's like if you're just a person who everywhere you're going around, you're just like you're just in awe of what's going on. Like, I feel this a lot nowadays, just with respect to like just seeing like the diversity of human beings. Like, I feel that almost every day at the moment, right? Which is basically, it's just so crazy, man. Like every single one is like,
there's a whole world inside each person, and they're just walking around and stuff.
Yeah, and there's that, and the fact that this person, there will be no one like this person ever before, ever again. With their uniqueness. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's a simple thing.
Yeah.
But it does blow my head, to be honest. Right?
Nice,
and then if you take that into your next, that kind of whatever emotions comes from, like, you take that into your next prayer, your next kind of thing. That's it. I mean, that's the life, and it is just to be. This is to be alive. I think, this is to be in a state of perception.
Yeah.
Right. So your senses are heightened. And so much of what's in the Revelation is telling us, like, don't you see, don't you hear, like, aren't you, what are you doing, basically? Aren't you just, can you not, like, it's all hidden in plain sight, essentially.
Yes, yeah. Okay, nice.
Cool. So, next prayer problem. You had a few, I thought.
So I've always wondered about the Wudhu, the ablution, as it's translated.
You've got my video title, Wondering About Wudhu.
Oh, is that actually a video? Yeah.
No,
okay, right. Yeah.
We've got to play on the alliteration.
Oh, okay.
There's only a few ways you can really like amplify Wudhu with people's consciousness. So Wudhu, water, and wondering. Combine all that.
Yeah. So I think that going back to the modern mind, I think that's something the modern mind has difficulty grasping.
Not at all.
Really?
Absolutely not.
Well, this modern mind does.
Okay, look. You tell me that after you've had a shower, you don't feel different on the inside.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody does. Like nobody does not feel different. And why is that? Now that's really interesting for me. That's how I frame it or understand this issue. Yeah. Okay. It's like, look, the shower is a spiritual experience. As far as I'm concerned. Okay.
I'm on board for the shower. Yeah, I love my showers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Okay. So the point is, we won't ask about your water usage and the environmental friendliness. the environmental friendliness of Taimur's showers. Yeah, that's a subject we can bring up later. Please post in the comments if you'd like to know more about this. But the point being is that is the effect, okay, of the wudu, essentially. Like, and that is the point. I mean, as far as that is the point of it. Look. Let's just be super clear. It is not about the physical, right? It's only about the physical to the point that you need some parameters, right? But the significance as far as God is concerned is not that, your elbow got wet or didn't.
Yeah.
Like just that fact. It's in terms of what it represents or symbolizes. That's obvious intuitively, I would say, and it's indicated in various prophetic sayings as well about the fact that this is the purification or the sanctification of the various parts or things that have been done or said or whatever. So let's say from a purification standpoint, like things that you have, the way you've used your faculties, again, because that's what you're doing, right? So it's like, it's kind of sight, mind, right? what I'm doing physically with my hands and where I'm going with my feet, essentially.
Okay.
Right?
So when you're making wudu, you're kind of like...
So you're processing the idea. So there's a natural effect of water on just... to the extent that it helps for your prayer to create have a dividing line between whatever just happened and what's about to happen.
Yeah.
It's just a refreshing thing, right? As soon as you've washed your face, that effect is undeniable, I think. But then beyond that point, there's a point of like there's also then the point of like I like to think about it like this. It's like I am, when you, I was going to say, like when you, I was going to try to say that when you, Taimur, get ready to come to film these sessions, you obviously take a lot of trouble with your appearance and everything else. But then I thought, no, I can't say that precisely because I'm not sure Taimur's really making the effort out here. but let's say, for example, someone's going for a job interview. Yeah. Someone's dressing up for a wedding. Right. You pay attention to your external appearance. Why? Because of how you're going to be perceived at the end of the day. And nothing wrong with that within reason. I mean, obviously some people go nuts about it, but it's like, within reason, that's just part and parcel of the thing. Now, but it's partly an act of respect to others as well, right? Meaning you don't want to you don't want to underdress or undershow yourself relative to the occasion. Okay, now look at this occasion. Yeah. Okay, now the point being is internal appearance, right? Do I want to come with my psychic junk, essentially, or whatever you want to call it, your internal impurities, right? If I'm spending time, well, not me, but if somebody's spending time, makeup and this and that and sorting themselves out, nice dress, nice suit, nice shirt with this, that, whatever, that's time spent on how I'm going to be seen by the people. Okay, what about a bit of time spent on how you're going to be seen by God? Part of that is a kind of, so I'm just saying that's a useful psychological way to think about it, right? A buffer, a refresh, a purification of. So think about like the fact that, okay, as I'm washing different parts of my body, like I feel like I'm resetting, I'm purifying, right, based on all the things that have happened. And now I bring that self in front of my Lord, essentially, right? So that I think is the way to, because it's a symbolic act. I mean, by the way, pretty much it's all symbolic, essentially. I mean, a great example of this, the symbolism part is like facing the Kaaba. Right, or orienting yourself towards Mecca, right? I mean, from here right now, if we draw the lines, we're probably facing Jupiter or something instead, right? So the point being, that, it's symbolic, right? It's just but it's a mental and internal reorientation, and yes, a unification thing as well, because otherwise we're all
how do you bring congregation
debating exactly. But the point is, ultimately, it's a sacred house. What does that remind us of, etc.? Again, Abraham, and the whole works. We go, it's all connected, essentially. So, that's how we understand wudu. That's why now I think in terms of people doing it, I think it's very important for us to have because this sort of dialogue around wudu gives us a confidence about it that then actually says okay, someone else might not be used to seeing this, just like all these other discussions about, God willing and this and that and God be praised and yada, yada, right? No, our job is to normalize, right? And I'm just saying, again, now you'll say, okay, are you saying that we go out of our way and start washing ourselves left, right? No, I'm not saying that thing. Sure. But what I'm trying to say is that if you would otherwise do it, right? Meaning that if you would otherwise go to a particular space, just whatever's practical to get on with, right? You don't have to look for, in public spaces or public places, going to look for the disabled toilet or look for that one, the cubicle that gives you the privacy. Yeah. If ordinarily you wouldn't, that wouldn't be a thing in your mind, and in a way, as a point of education, sometimes I think we should leverage the language of diversity and inclusion. Okay. Right? I mean, meaning what I'm trying to say is that if that's the vibe in any particular workplace or wherever else, well, do your thing then, and then let a conversation happen. Oh, how come? Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, okay, fine. And those who, so we're very, we have a lot of anxiety around these things because we have insecurities around these things, but we shouldn't have insecurities around these things. Of course, we should be very secure. Iman, by the way, is security. It's a great. How do you
faith? Yeah, go on. Do you feel like you've shed the insecurity around doing wudu in public?
I have.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And salah and stuff generally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I prayed in all sorts of random places. And I'm not saying that as a point of pride. I'm just and yet you are as in you're aware of it, but the idea, it's I do think it's a powerful, over time, that's definitely evolved. Yeah, I remember, I don't want to use the phrase, but I remember I don't know what's the kind of appropriate way to say it. It's almost bricking it, basically, right? The first time or the first few times you ever do that. I'm trying to think, now, I can't actually remember, I can't remember the very first occasion, but I used to have it in my mind, but I think my kind of, my memory doesn't reach as far back now. Where that first occasion when you're in that situation, right? And then it's like, will you, won't you, all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
That fork in the road is a very powerful moment, I think, as like, it's kind of that red pill, blue pill sort of moment of like, what am I going to go with now?
Yes,
And frankly, who is God to me? And where is he in the kind of the hierarchy of my attention, essentially? So yeah, I think if you experience it for what it is, then I think, or you understand it for what it is, then it's your experience of it that matters. The fact that someone else doesn't understand it, well, they're never going to understand if they never see the thing. And they never understand if they never discuss the thing. And I'm just saying that when it becomes known as a thing, it's like, for example, the idea of one thing that has really aided just the in the culture, like the appreciation of certain things, for example, is like, when footballers have, go and prostrate after they score. Like, that's not, again, they're not, I imagine the vast majority of them are not doing it performatively. Right? They just like that's their way to. They feel that's the way I should say. They've probably observed over time or thought over time that people are celebrating it and it's all about them. That's actually the MashaAllah kind of moment, right? Like, and that's what God wanted that ball to go in that in this space, right?
Yeah.
Like let me position myself accordingly, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Super powerful, right? I mean, and so the point being is, it's not like that. These things are like, I think just being part of that thing where it becomes a normalized.
Of course.
It's very powerful, and it, like as many have attested, right? Hearing the call to prayer or observing, especially prayer in unison, right? I actually think some of these things we should actually make a point of. I think we should be almost, for the purposes of public education and understanding, almost organizing some of these things more actively publicly in a way, so as to facilitate appreciation and understanding. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think if well done, like, I think it could be a very kind of useful thing.
Yeah, I think the one thing that what you were saying earlier got me thinking was that I think there's a lot of, I think when there is, let's call it an obligation, or when there's something that we put in the bucket of like the natural world, for example, we have to sleep every night. We just get tired and then we have to sleep. And, we have to eat and we have to drink, right? Like, these are sort of obligations that are ultimately from God, kind of like, God's kind of created us in this way.
Right.
Those things sort of feel supernatural to us. Like, we feel the pang of hunger and the thirst and the tiredness, and we do these things. Like, I guess part of your coherence thing is that, we should be so in tune. Our day should be sort of structured in such a way, and we should be kind of, in the right state, sort of the Asr time or Maghrib time coming around. We should almost kind of be feeling the pang of thirst for it, of like, okay, I haven't prayed in what,
that's powerful,
and like,
feel the need. I wanted to complete that with the need for speed, but that's obviously not what you want when the salah comes. But no, I think what you mentioned is that's very powerful. Like, in terms of, and I think, I think that is within the possibility for you to experience. You see, the other thing is it's also about these prayer times, where it's also, can we experience them more naturally as well? I do find it's almost like you kind of feel that. Obviously we do everything by like the phone and the numbers and the digits and stuff, and that has its benefits, of course, but it also slightly takes away from, the actual reality of things, which is more in tune with what you've said, which is where, like, enough time has progressed now. I just feel like I need to get back there almost thing. Yeah. And I'm sure, many people will experience that. And then, it just starts to become a lot more intuitive, natural, in sync with your kind of with your reality, and I think that we will, when we're not kind of the point is, right, when we rush that engagement or we miss the engagement altogether, like there's a reason we feel something, which is similar to, I had less sleep than I needed, or I ate less than I needed, or I drank less than I needed.
Next question is, what is so when in the sort of seated part of the prayer before you wrap up, we send blessings on Muhammad, peace be upon him, and also Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him.
Yeah.
What's the significance of, like, out of all of the prophets out there, I mean, we would kind of get the significance of Muhammad in this context, I guess.
Yeah.
I always found it just a bit peculiar that Abraham is also called out there.
Yeah, but if you look at the context or if you look at what's actually being said, then it probably won't feel that way, because
it's like bless Muhammad as you have blessed.
Right,
Abraham.
exactly. Okay, so the way I like to do this, I say, like, imagine you are one of the companions around the Prophet, peace be upon him. Okay, so you're sitting behind him in the midst of a mission whose success seems unclear. Okay. That's quite important to remember, I think, actually, just to add to the weight of what's being said, especially at that time. Why? Because they're invoking Abraham because of a successful legacy of prophethood, scripture, guidance. That's essentially the entire lineage of all the pretty much all of the stories and all of the prophets that are mentioned in the Quran are from the Abrahamic, either through Ishmaelite or Israelites, essentially. Yeah. So, and he is the kind of, as they call, almost like, the patriarch, the first prophet in civilization. Yeah. So it's like Abraham is Mesopotamia, earliest civilization. This is the kind of part and parcel of the significance of him, right? Okay. And so, because obviously we could say, well, why not Noah? Why not this one, that one, the other one, right? So I think that's what's explained as part and parcel of.
But can you just talk about this Mesopotamia? This is the first time I'm hearing any link between that.
Yeah. There are definitely people who could articulate this better than me, but the way I have understood it is something like, meaning, why is the reference put back to him and not back to Noah or whatever?
Right, yeah, or even Adam, right?
Oh, right, exactly. Now they are referenced, but in slightly different contexts. In other, there's this interesting. I think in some Christian discussions on this, they have this distinction between pre-Diluvian and post-Diluvian. And Diluvian refers to the deluge. Right? I learned this relatively.
What does that mean? What's the deluge?
The flood, right? The Noah's flood. So pre-Diluvian prophets and post-Diluvian prophets.
Wow. Okay.
This is the different eras.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point about Abraham is like, so it's to do with, like, okay, so Adam. Okay, if Adam is first Homo sapiens, what is that human experience and sort of like relative to the Abrahamic experience as a human being in what you're now starting to get constellations of, let's call it the towns, cities, social, the way life is. It's not completely nomadic or hunter-gatherer type of thing, right?
We're reaching large-scale societies.
Right, exactly. So Mesopotamia, as far as I'm aware, exactly. So Mesopotamia is referred or referenced there as the first kind of civilization in that kind of context, in the midst of which Abraham is functional, which then makes him the relevant starting point.
I see.
For this whole thing. Okay, and anyway, as we know, the legacy of the various prophets goes back there. So the point being is, he is put forward in Revelation as a towering example of everything that is good, and he is the ultimate representation of how to be. Okay, as far as God is concerned. Yeah. And this is why there is that reference about God taking Abraham as a close friend. Okay. Yeah. So now, you're a companion in the midst of this restoration mission of the legacy of Abraham. Now it makes complete sense, in the midst of all that uncertainty, to say, Allahumma salli, Allahumma barik, right? That God, give your, I like to translate it there to differentiate the two, like give your grace, if you like, or your favor, to Muhammad as you did and the family and followers of Muhammad as you did upon Abraham, and then barik is blessing. Now we should just look at what we mean by these two things. What do we actually? So what were they asking for? Like in real plain terms. Yeah. What I understand they're asking for is, God, please help our leader, right? Right, and bless his efforts. Right, elevate him, elevate his state. Salli, when we say sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all right, and to invoke blessings upon him, is to do with the idea. Quite a lot of it's to do with the idea of the elevation of his status and reputation. Right, they say in Arabic it's the idea of what's called ta'zim, which simply just means to make great. So they essentially, because if his status if his status and his reputation increases, what does that mean? That essentially means that the thing is flourishing, right? The thing is working somehow. People are looking to this as the example. So now, and then the amplification of the effort. So one is almost like a kind of reputation, sort of almost like the brand almost of it, and one is like the benefits, right? The amplification of the effect. So do it for him now, as you did it before. Make it work, essentially.
Okay, yeah.
Now, the real interesting thing then is that when we say it, so what do we mean?
Yeah.
Now this is where it comes full circle in a way, because, and it becomes quite powerful, because you're basically sitting there and saying you're asking for him and his name to be essentially elevated in some way, right? And for the blessing or for the effects of his efforts to be amplified. But then the interesting question is, well, who's going to make that happen? Right? Like you and me and whoever, right? Whoever actually takes it on.
Yeah.
So the irony of it, hidden and contained within it, I feel, is almost kind of, I'm asking God to have this effect. But the Prophet, peace be upon him himself, is no longer here to be the vehicle through which the effect takes place. But then who is? Well, that's us. So it's almost indirectly a way of saying, like, help us to honor him.
Okay, right.
Yeah. As you honored sort of the Abrahamic legacy. And what's preceding that in the prayer, of course, right in the sitting position at the beginning, in short, is very, very powerful, because the way to think about it in the context of the whole prayer is the fact that this analogy of, like, it's like if the prayer is almost like these phases through which you're coming closer and closer to the proximity of the king, right? So if you look at this analogy, some impoverished peasant from the field, right, has come to now visit the king, washes up, by the way, before he comes to the court, and now goes in these prayers, he's coming through like closer and closer rooms. I don't know if you've seen the film. One of my favorite films is Hero, right? Jet Li.
No.
This is about, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. Right?
Okay.
Great movie, right? But one of the things in there, you realize, so he's like a warrior, and he's been summoned by the emperor. But the point being, as he earns the emperor's approval, basically he moves closer and closer in stages towards the emperor. You can't just turn up just like this, right? It's protocol. When I got my MBE and I visited, received it from the Queen, right? Yeah. It's like...
he just wanted to drop that in there. He had to.
Flex, bro, flex. I to be honest, I don't sort of shout about it at all. But just to give the example, since it's my only, I think it's my only...
royal.
Apart from dealing with you, of course, it's my only example of dealing with any kind of royalty. Okay. So it's like, but there's protocol, right? Yeah. So you can't. Anyway, so the point being is you get closer. Now, in that the sitting position is a closing off of a phase, because even in a 4-unit prayer, in the first time, it's still closing a phase. The prayer essentially is in twos.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes you'll finish with an odd unit, which is only in 2 cases, but generally it's in twos. Okay. When you're in that sitting position, it's like you've come into the final room. Okay. And in that final room, you have essentially like the idea of the presence of God, like chief minister, right? Okay. Courtiers, team members, everyone's surrounded. And what are you doing? Look, you're in the first part, at-tahiyatu lillah, etc., is greetings, compliments to God. Then you're saying, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi, wa assalamu ala nabi, peace be upon the Prophet. Then you're saying, Assalamu alayna, peace be upon us. Then you're saying, wa ala ibadillahi salihin, all the righteous servants of God. Look at what's the invoking that's going on, right? So you're basically offering compliments and greetings and invoking safety, security, peace upon all of the relevant parties, let's say, right? Yeah. And then you're saying, I bear witness, right? Okay. Then you lift your finger and you say, I bear witness that there is only one God, etc. Like, I always found this really interesting. Why would you? I find this powerful because, like, greetings are done at the beginning, right? You told me that in the last episode. Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, right? Yeah, the point. So what here? It's kind of like at the end of the phase. It's like now you've arrived, almost. It kind of feels a little bit like that. Okay. And then it's kind of, you're doing that, but it's almost like you're recognizing the relevant thing. And then in the midst of that group, you are affirming. So it's a loyalty affirmation, essentially, right? It's like you're not, like, it's kind of, yes, you're saying it yourself, right? Yeah. And this idea of, again, one of these like phrases that I don't like, taking the shahada. Yeah. Right. This is the point. This is where this first pillar is not a one-time thing. Yeah. You can look at it as a technical one-time thing, but it's actually pretty much the most regular thing that we do. Yeah. Right. This redeclaration. Yeah. I
was recently thinking. Yeah. As I've been trying to like reflect more on sort of the meanings and stuff. Yeah. I have recently been thinking,
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that the Shahada is like thrown in there.
Yeah, but it's not.
And like at the end.
But it's not weird. Like, I get exactly, I 110% get you.
Yeah.
But it's only weird because of this framing that we have, which is basically that there is a pillar called the Shahada, which is this one-time thing you do to enter, and basically now you're in the fold, and now it's all done, and now you're in Islam, and you're a Muslim, and all that stuff. That, like, yeah, you get.
Well,
hang on, wait. Right. You get the place of that, but I don't think that most people are actually doing that. Like, as you yourself have said, it's only recently you kind of more tuned into the fact that that's even going on. It's the same. It's like literally the same wording. Yeah. Right. So when young John after the Friday prayer comes and says John's now joining, and he says, "Oh, ashhadu, Allah," right? It's all the same stuff. It's literally identical phrase. So now it's not like, oh, the one-time thing. So it's funny. It's almost like, the celebration with which we receive that is a celebratory feeling we should have when we say it ourselves, day in, day out, day in, day out. And there is that kind of idea of the kind of doing it in the kind of public presence of, and now invoking the blessings for Muhammad, and then you're going almost like historically thinking Abraham, etc. Finish with your final supplications, and then you're done, right? It's really powerful because actually, if we get the sitting position right, like that's like mad motivation going on there, because you feel, this is the point. This is a really critical thing, and obviously a big part of what this whole thing is about, I suppose, in one way, which is that one thing fundamentally that we are missing, right, is an idea of a shared cause. Right, I don't we do not have a shared cause that is almost, let's say, inherent or part and parcel of what it is that we actually believe in the first place. We have reactive causes, like reactive mini causes, I would say. Okay, obviously the Palestine situation is a great example of that, and no doubt worthy, obviously, but it is not the macro, like the ultimate macro cause. It fits within a broader picture, and regardless of if that weren't to be a situation right now, there would still be an underlying cause, which is obvious actually. Again, it's one of the hidden in plain sight things, which is to say that it is for those who believe in God to pursue a societal situation, an order on earth that aligns with the divine order. The fact that with every prayer you are reaffirming your commitment in this kind of, and acknowledging the presence of all the different parties, right, of the team, so to speak, is a very powerful dynamic in that context, because you move then, the prayer becomes you're worshipping, but you're phasing out into your ambassadorial phase in between the prayers.
Yeah.
Right? That's life. That is life.
Yeah.
Worship ambassador, worship ambassador, worship ambassador.
Yeah.
That is life.
That's interesting, yeah.
More than interesting, brother.
Mate, I like it. Okay.
Come on, I thought we get 4.7 stars for that, at least. Which is there's a Trustpilot score. There's a Taimur pilot score. the Taimur score. But yeah, so I think that is the way to. I mean, you conclude your prayer like that, you're buzzing. And honestly, sometimes when I say to people, I remember there was an analogy that I gave for the prayer in the first episode, and you were a little bit unsure about it, right?
Oh, yeah?
Initially. But it was basically this thing about, like, when you plug your phone into charge.
Oh, yes,
thing, right?
yeah.
And I was talking about the current and stuff.
Yeah, whether you've switched it on.
But let's just extend that in the context of this. There, you get that little positive kick, that dopamine hit, right? When you pick your phone back up and you see 100 or 100%. Yeah. It's like, I am ready to go.
Yeah.
I can do stuff now.
Yeah.
That's exactly that is where you want to be when your prayer ends.
Okay.
I'm ready to go. Like, it's like I am like pumped now, charged, pumped, whatever word you want to use, and I'm ready to go. And now go do what? Well, maybe that's for another discussion. But represent, man. That's it. Represent.
Okay.
All right.
That's really good. Yeah. Lots to mull over on the last part of the prayer.
Cool. Is that it then?
I think we're
this hasn't
close.
timed, but we've had some flashing in the corner. I think we're probably where are we now? Yeah, we're good. I think it was a nice note to end on. I mean, we ended with the ending of the
yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that was awesome.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right.
Until next time.